I wanted to ask you about your recent run-in with Debbie Wasserman Schultz in Washington, D.C., because she tried to pull that gotcha line on you, which I don't know if you saw our coverage of that, but we got into this before. But she pulled that line on you.
You say she had like a raisin face or something like that? I actually laughed out loud.
Raisin-faced Medusa,
snake-haired Medusa looking something. See, well, it's great to be quoted by me. That's not one of my most eloquent quotes, but
I thought it was great.
Thank you. I thought you nailed it.
I'm glad. I would have gone more severe with it, but then you wouldn't be able to quote it back to me, or else you'd get canceled. So I went with. I think I ended it on Tool.
He's canceled.
Yeah, right. Oh, that's true. You are canceled. All right. But she quoted that Rogan line where you said, once you start getting handed things, then you've lost. They have you at that point. You got to get out of that habit. And you responded by saying something to the effect that, a whistleblower always has a certain motive. And what I picked up on in that exchange was that these people cannot view Elon Musk as a whistleblower because he's rich, because he's the second richest man in the world. He represents institutional power. Therefore, he cannot blow the whistle on institutional power. So they don't view him in that way. Do you think that was because that seems to be where our points of view can't really match up with a lot on the left and a lot of the liberals on this. They just can't compute in their head Elon Musk whistleblower. Billionaire cannot be whistleblower.
Yeah, and I get it. And look, that line, it doesn't look good when they put it up there, and they're talking about and there's a big quote by me talking about the ethics of not being handed things. But it's a very different situation. I mean, one of the first stories I did for Rolling Stone was covering the campaign, and I started to become frustrated by the way journalists were every day like lining up like farm animals just to be fed these sort of press releases and bits of information, and then immediately after that they would be fed the most amazing food. Like that was the whole secret of the campaign. And something clicked in my head, and I stopped eating. Like I went on a hunger strike. I didn't eat for the rest of the trip. And by the end of it, I was crazy. But that for me was a big metaphor. Like don't take things and don't eat. But what I was quoting was something from a Cy Hirsch book, and he was talking about the experience of being invited to Langley by the CIA to do a story about an Israeli spy they had caught, and he was just very uncomfortable about that because here was somebody who was the committed adversary of the CIA being invited in by the CIA. It makes you feel weird. But this situation, you're right. It's different, and people can't process it because they think of how rich and powerful Elon Musk is compared to the ordinary person. But you have to think about this in the context of all of these other massive institutions and this other thing that we're discovering, this kind of like censorship industrial complex, which is, it's even bigger than executive power. I would say it's right. In the context of that, even somebody like Elon Musk is a relatively small player. I think people have to understand that. And it's having $200 billion that can turn into not a lot of money quickly. I mean, I know how that sounds, right. But yes. And I always viewed him, as somebody who was, creating a problem just by opting out of this very airtight information cartel that had been created, and that we were learning about later in the Twitter files. There's all sorts of reasons why Twitter's non-participation in these coordinated schemes creates issues, among other things, because a lot of these NGOs are dependent upon free fire hose data that they've been getting from all these platforms, and when he cuts that off, it's like messes with everybody's rice bowl, and so that's a problem. And but no, yeah, people can't process the fact that somebody who's rich and powerful can also just be a cog in a system as well.
Well, and that's where all of this, I mean, I have a whole page on my news feed that's just hits on Elon Musk. There's a whole Elon Musk section where it's just hits on him. Where are the hits on Bill Gates, who lied to the public about the manufacturing capacity for vaccines as an excuse for not releasing the IPs? Why aren't they hitting Bill Gates?
Well, right. I mean, I think, as you put it, I mean, they're all assholes, right? I mean, when you get to that level, you're going to be stepping over bodies to, to secure your fortune over and over and over again, as almost definitionally as part of what you are. But some of these billionaires are different from others. Some of them have different motives and get into different things and do different things with their money. Some of them just want to be hedonistic and buy yachts that have 2 helipads on them. I think that Jeff Bezos actually has one of those. Like, why you would need 2 helipads, I'm not sure. But
I can see Jeffrey Epstein having 2 helipads.
Well,
because they might have to evacuate those pretty quick. They might not. Yeah,
right.
Bezos, I don't know.
Yeah. But I think Elon, I don't know him very well. But what interaction I have had suggests to me that he's got a legitimate and sincere desire to do something in opposition to some things that have happened in the last 5 or 6 years. I would say he's patriotic in his own way, like maybe not in the same way that some other people might perceive patriotism, but I think he's doing this for reasons that don't have to do with money or self-interest particularly. Certainly Twitter is not like your ideal business opportunity if you were going to spend $44 billion, I think. So, and that's part of that. Honestly, that was part of my calculation when doing this story. After I met him, is this the kind of person who's going to sell me out and give me information that's going to end up making me look like a complete jackass later? I didn't think so. I mean, obviously that's not scientific, but it's part of your reasoning when you do these stories.
I mean, that's a really interesting answer, because in that way, I think there's a parallel to Trump as well. I had a lot of my friends asking me, why is Donald Trump running for president? There must be some motive, right? He's doing it for money. I'm like, no, I don't think so. I mean, I think, as crazy as he is, I think he thinks he'd be a good president. That's why I think he's doing it. And I think Elon's doing this for I think he has a very similar motive in that sense. And, we talked about Bill Gates and Jeff Bezos and Musk. To a certain extent, though, I think like these Twitter files could not have happened unless an eccentric, uber rich billionaire,
of course,
did it. Because to me, like 1,000 guys making $600,000 a year are going to be much more loyal to the system than one guy who's worth $200 billion, because those 1,000 guys making $600,000 have something to lose if they piss off the wrong people. Whereas Elon is one of the handful of people in the world who can afford to just, take $45 billion, buy the app, and let it ride. We'll see what happens.
Absolutely, and your average person who's sitting on explosive information can't afford the unknown negatives that might come with letting a bunch of journalists run loose in a conference room, going through your company's emails. I mean, even just from a liability standpoint, one of the things that actually reassured me that this story was kosher was the look on the faces of some of these lawyers whenever they saw us. There was a look of dread that looked real to me. This is the kind of thing. It's a 1 in a million thing, and obviously it would never happen unless he had that thought. And I think people should realize that this is the kind of thing. It just doesn't happen very often. I mean, I can't think of an analog to it, frankly.
Well, and also, as you point out, in the end, he's a cog in a system, and 200 billion. That can go away. There was no real upside for him personally to do this, particularly given that the people who are most swayed by the corporate media that's pounding him every day are the people who buy Teslas.
Right.
Right. And give out contracts to, space companies, right? I mean, like, definitely if he was acting out of pure self-interest, this would not be the thing you would want to do, obviously, because it's created a host of problems. And you see the way the media has reacted, and that started before we came on board, obviously, but it's accelerated 100-fold since the Twitter file started. It's the Hitler of the Month Club thing. I think you've all seen this playbook a million times. Like, whenever we want to crank out ultimate evil, Saddam, Milosevic, whatever, now we do it to people in our own country. And it's even more intense. I mean, I'm sure you've had the experience. I run into people who I know personally, and if you even mention Elon Musk's name, they like cringe. Like they don't want to be in the same room with the word echoing in it, which is incredible. The media environment has gotten that intense now.
Please clap.